Hope and Tarwater. Two towns bordered a woodland. Each of the towns had a tradition about the woods. In the one it was said, the woods are dangerous and many things there can hurt you. The animals include the mountain lion and wild boar, which have been known to injure many a man, and the bear, which has killed many a man. As the course of civilization develops, the woods are always subdued and tamed. The wild things are domesticated and the dangerous are killed. In time, the woods becomes a backyard, no longer threatening to humanity. In the other, it was said, the woods are beautiful, and many things there can surprise you with their loveliness. The animals include the bluebird and chipmunk, which have been known to sing for hours, and the wild deer, which has inspired many a painter and poet. As the course of civilization develops, the woods are always subdued and tamed. The wild beauty is domesticated, and many lovely creatures are killed. In time, the woods become a backyard, no longer providing humanity with rare scenes of wild beauty. The first town was named Tarwater for an explorer who had survived there against all odds. He came in winter and had to find warmth, food, and shelter while battling the elements. He felled trees, built a cabin, and burned trees for warmth, which he cleared from around his homestead. He slew animals to eat and kept their hides for clothing. The second was named Hope, for a woman who raised her children there against all odds. She came in summer, settled in a meadow, and found everything she needed to survive in or on the land. She placed her tent beside a hot spring, which provided her warmth in the cold winter. She ate berries and wild fruit and found pine nuts plentiful. She was able to weave the flax growing wild beside her stream and made linen clothing for herself and her children. The children of Tarwater never entered the woods unarmed. They expected to find danger and were prepared to meet and oppose it. The children of Hope never entered the woods without a basket or a bag. They expected to find food and flowers and were prepared to gather them in gratitude. Lance was a son of Tarwater. James was a son of Hope. They each entered the woods on the same summer day. Lance entered quietly, expecting to give any lurking danger no notice of his presence. Stealth was one of his weapons. Lance brought a bow and arrow. James entered singing and expecting to greet the forest's beauty with the joy of his song. Music was his often companion while in the woods. James carried a scroll. From Tarwater there were no paths into the woods. Those who entered always took their own way, fearing to leave a trail to teach predators there was a place frequented by men. Lance crept about in the shadows, watching for prey and hoping to avoid anything which might cause him harm. From Hope, however, there were paths which led to the meadows and berry patches, known to bloom in the woods. James walked along a path from Hope which led into the woods, hoping for new food to gather and share with his family. Many bears lurked in the woods near Tarwater. Near Hope, however, frequent human visitors along well-known pathways made the bears leave, for they did not like the company of mankind. Lance moved with care, his bow ready to set and fight his arrow. He intended to bring meat back to the village and hoped to encounter prey without a long hike. He knew every step he took away from Tarwater would be required return step which he carried his game while he carried his game. He moved in cautious arcs, spreading his search ever wider, with each arc that penetrated into the woods. He passed the morning searching without success. Just after midday, the sky began to cloud. To Lance, this meant the shadows may be leaving, and could not be used to orient him for the return hike. To mark his way, he took out his hatchet and stripped the bark on one side of a trunk to maintain his orientation, using what may be the last shadows. Now, because of the clouding sky, Lance's journey was changed from arching to a straight line. When the mark on the trunk was still faintly visible from the distance, he cut another mark on the same side of a new tree, and after stripping the bark cut 2 axe marks below it to signify That was the second of his marks. When he was 6 marks away from where he started, he stopped and waited for such game as may cross his path. It began to rain. Animals would settle down in the rain, and would not wander into his concealed position. It was an unfortunate development, which meant hunting this day was coming to an end. Reluctantly, Lance began his walk back to Tarwater. His return was less cautious than it had been his advance. The sound of the falling rain concealed his footsteps, so he needn't take care for his footfalls. Now he was alert for only danger, and not for hunting game. Bears do not need sounds to help them hunt, but the intermittent sound of the chopping was what originally caught the great bear's attention. It was not familiar to him. He had closed in to sight Lance from the sound, but he waited to begin his hunt of the young man until after the rain began to fall. The sound of the rain would conceal the bear's steps until he was close. Then a charge would allow him to attack Lance before the young man could repel the charge. Over the sound of the falling rain, Lance heard a distinct crack from behind. He knew in an instant it was not rain, but the sound produced by some much heavier object breaking a twig or branch. For the son of Tarwater, instinct took over. He turned behind a tree while loading and drawing back his bow in a single movement. The charging bear was more than his bow could kill, but Lance was taught how to respond to danger of this kind. He knew bears could run fast uphill, but could not run fast down. Their legs were built for uphill speed, but downhill they were awkward and even clumsy. There was a depression to the left of him, but Lance was unfamiliar with this part of the woods. He could not know if the depression was a bowl inside of which he could be trapped, or a hill, which would put distance between him and his predator. He also knew that his arrow would do the bear no harm if it struck his head, but it might be of great advantage if it were lodged in his front shoulder. It would take some luck as well as skill to place the arrow in a spot which could rescue him, so Lance took careful aim before letting his arrow fly. Immediately upon releasing his arrow, Lance took flight. He could not afford the time it would take to see it hit. His aim had been just to the left, so that as Lance sprinted away towards the depression, the bear's changed route would intersect the arrow. Luck was with him, and Lance's arrow had some effect. When he glanced back over his shoulder, Lance caught the view of a bear tumbling forward. That could mean only one thing. The arrow had struck his shoulder and momentarily caused a front leg to fold. This would add time for his escape. To his relief, the depression was a hillside. Lance flew to the bottom, then cut sharply downwind and looked for a way to retreat in secret. He needed to find a place where he might not be able to be seen before the bear reached the hilltop. If he was seen, then concealing his scent with the wind wouldn't matter. He found a rock outcropping which allowed him to change directions yet again, and was certain his dart concealed him before the bear reached the hilltop. This was very hopeful. The bear took time to bite at the pain in his shoulder. It stung him, and he had momentarily cost him the use of his arm. Arrows do not dislodge by pulling at them, and so the bear could only break away the arrow. He could not dislodge the arrowhead. Ever since God taught Nimrod the secret of making arrows, mankind has benefited from a weapon which always drives deeper after striking its target. The shape takes advantage of a muscle movement and pushes deeper and deeper into the animal once hit. The bear's arrow sank on impact into the shoulder, and his struggle to remove it dug it deeper. In his anger at the sting, the bear recovered his senses and returned to hunt his prey. This time not just for food, but also to vanquish a challenger to his territory. When, however, he reached the spot from which the young man had been lost to his sight, the young man was nowhere to be seen. He studied the area below, but could detect no hint of movement or scent. The bear moved cautiously into the valley. Lance, however, was moving quickly beyond the valley, and changing directions to conceal his retreat. It was many hours later before he rested for the first time. But then the rain had stopped, and he could listen again for the sound of any movement behind him. He was well, alive, and perhaps even now safe from his dangerous pursuer. But he was lost, and it was getting dark. Most predators fear fire. However, a wounded bear pursuing an attacker would not. Lance knew if he built a fire this night he would announce his location to the bear, so he would remain wet, cold, lost, and on guard throughout the night. The cloud cover remained, though the rain had stopped. At first light, Lance searched for a clearing from which he might see the horizon. When he finally discovered an opening, it must have been midday, he thought. He studied it carefully for any sign of a threat, both within the meadow and around its perimeter. He thought he saw a man carrying something moving away at the far end, but his view was distant and he could not be sure. When satisfied, he entered quickly to the center, then scanned the horizon for the highest point. He memorized the scene and left quickly and quietly in the new direction. It was half a day's hike to the highest point. On the way he found water and killed squirrels for a meal. It was dark when the ascent ended. He would have to await daylight to reorient himself again. Overnight, the clouds finally cleared while he slept for the first time since entering the woods. In the morning, from the highest point of the horizon, Lance knew the east from the rising sun, then studied the direction from which he began for anything familiar. Shortly after sunup, he found what he was looking for. A small plume of smoke rose in the distance. This would be Tarwater. From where he was standing, Lance estimated it would be a day and a half to walk back to his village. He would wait to hunt again until the second day. Until then, he would be journeying toward home. When James entered the wood from Hope, he followed the main path until its first fork, where he followed the path to the right. This he knew would lead to the great meadow deep in the woods. He intended to gather a full load of pine nuts, which the sun had dried along the meadow's perimeter. His mission served two purposes. First, to gather food. Second, to prevent new seedlings from encroaching on the meadow. By turning these seeds to food, the people of Hope preserved what was valuable, a large meadow in their woods. When he had hiked half a day, clouds began to gather. James was in no hurry and determined if he started to rain, he would take cover off the path. It did rain. He took a forked branch along with a straight branch. With the straight branch, he lifted a dense patch of ferns, propping the branch at one end with the forked one. This made the rain drain away from the raised center, where he sat and waited. It rained until nightfall, and so James determined to sleep on his dry spot beneath the ferns. As the last light of day lingered, he wrote his thoughts upon his scroll. Early the next morning he set off again in the direction of the meadow. When he arrived, he walked the perimeter until he found where his pine cones remained unharvested. He took out his bag and began to remove their seeds. When emptied, he threw the pine cones back into the trees and off the meadow perimeter. The process was slow but not monotonous. He enjoyed the work. James was nearby the fawn for hours before he noticed it lying there. Fawns have only one defense, to lay motionless and hope to escape detection. When he noticed it, James knew by its stillness it was hiding from him. He watched it for a moment to confirm it was breathing. Then he withdrew in reverence. He walked along the perimeter until he found where the pine cones started again in the other direction. Then he resumed work. Although he intended to leave the fawn alone, he noticed its mother did not return that day. It was late in the evening when his bag was filled, and so he thought it would do no harm to spend that night and see the fawn was taken care of by its mother. In the morning, James checked to confirm the fawn had not yet stirred, then retired to a hiding spot on the meadow perimeter. By midday, the fawn was moving and stood. This was a sign to James that the fawn was now in danger, and its mother was not going to return. He walked to it. It did not flee. He took it in his arms and returned to pick up his bag. As he left the meadow, a man with a bow entered the far end. James's return to hope was slowed by the load he carried. But the fawn needed care, and Sir James was grateful to repay a debt owed to the forest. When Lance entered Tarwater, many gathered to find out what had taken him so long. He told them the tale of his days of danger and flight in the woods. Tarwater was reminded again that the woods are dangerous, and many things there can hurt you. The wild still needed to be subdued, and its dangers overcome. When James entered Hope, many gathered to find out what had taken him so long. He showed them the fawn and told them the story of his walk. Hope was reminded again that the woods are beautiful, and many things there can surprise you with their loveliness.